The holographic chamber of the Centennial Galactic Conclave stretched impossibly wide, a crystalline expanse that defied human architectural understanding. Luminescent data streams danced between molecular thin force fields, representing civilizations that had conquered faster than light travel centuries, even millennia, before humanity had learned to split the atom. Dr. Aria Chen stood perfectly still, her midnight blue diplomatic uniform crisp and devoid of the ornate technological augmentations sported by other delegates. At 42, she represented humanity with a composure that bordered on mathematical precision. Beside her, Ambassador Ricardo Mendez and Technical Attaché Dr. James Wong completed their three-person delegation, a number that seemed laughably small against the backdrop of over 200 alien civilizations. The Archean delegation dominated the central platform. Serpentine and crystalline, their bodies were living quantum computers, each movement a complex algorithmic dance. Their representative, Grand Diplomat Exlarin, towered nearly 3 meters tall, its prismatic body refracting light in impossible geometric patterns. When it spoke, the translation matrix rendered its communication as a blend of mathematical equations and emotional resonances. Humanity, Exlarin began, its voice a calculated blend of condescension and scientific curiosity, represents the most primitive technological civilization ever granted observation status in the Galactic Consortium. Your species has demonstrated remarkable persistence. The last word dripped with such patronizing tone that several nearby delegations, the silicon-based Kreenax and the gaseous luminaries, erupted in synchronized laughter. Their communication matrices synchronized, creating a wave of derision that rippled through the holographic chamber. Ambassador Mendez maintained a diplomatic smile, but Aria noticed the microscopic muscle tension of the corner of his right eye. She knew precisely what was coming. With deliberate motions that seemed almost choreographed, Exlarin extended one crystalline appendage and brought it down directly onto the small data tablet carried by the human delegation. The device shattered with a sharp, almost musical crack that echoed through the chamber. Primitive, Exlarin repeated. Your communication technologies are so fragile, so limited. More laughter. Waves of dismissive energy radiated from dozens of alien delegations. To them, humanity was less than a curiosity. They were an anomaly, a statistical error in galactic development. What none of them saw was Dr. Aria Chen's left eye, augmented with a quantum recording device of her own design. Every moment, every dismissive gesture, every contemptuous laugh was being recorded with crystalline precision. Her retinal implant captured not just visual data, but quantum-level emotional signatures, a technology so advanced that even the most sophisticated alien delegations were unaware of its existence. A slight smile, invisible to anyone watching, played across her lips. The Archean continued its presentation, outlining humanity's technological limitations. Their star charts showed human expansion as a tiny, almost imperceptible cluster compared to the vast networks of established civilizations. They spoke of environmental challenges, of humanity's internecine conflicts, of technological innovations that seemed laughably primitive. They did not know that within Dr. Chen's meticulously designed recording device lay the first seeds of humanity's revenge. Every dismissive word, every condescending gesture was being transformed into something far more dangerous than a simple historical record. In that moment, as alien delegations celebrated their perceived superiority, they were writing the first chapter of their own destruction. The Martian asteroid mining facility 12 looked like nothing more than a desperate attempt at survival. Perched on the ragged edge of the solar system's most unforgiving resource field, it was humanity's last-ditch effort to extract value from seemingly worthless chunks of space rock. Marcus Rodriguez pressed his hand against the quantum resonance scanner, its holographic display flickering with an unpredictability that would have been unacceptable in any other scientific facility. At 35, he was the youngest lead researcher ever assigned to an extreme resource extraction project, a testament to humanity's willingness to throw its most brilliant minds at impossible challenges. Anomaly detected, the facility's AI muttered, its voice a deliberately neutral tone that masked decades of technological frustration. Quantum signature inconsistent with standard mineral composition. The asteroid, designated M127X, was supposed to be nothing special. A misshapen chunk of rock, barely larger than a city block, it had been overlooked by every other species as not worth the fuel to approach. But humans were different. They saw potential where others saw waste. Rodriguez's team consisted of 9 researchers, each more unconventional than the last. Dr. Elena Sharma, a quantum physicist who had been laughed out of 3 major research institutions for her impossible theories. Jack Chen, a materials engineer who had once rebuilt an entire particle accelerator using parts scavenged from a decommissioned satellite. Mikhail Volkov, a computational genius who could write quantum algorithms faster than most people could type a simple email. "Run the scan again," Rodriguez commanded, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface that looked like a mad artist's interpretation of scientific equipment. The facility trembled, not from external forces, but from the internal resonance of the scanner. Quantum entanglement sensors began to spike in patterns that defied every known law of physics. Where other species would have shut down the experiment, Rodriguez's team leaned in closer. Elena Sharma's eyes went wide. "That's impossible," she whispered, a phrase that had become something of a mantra in human scientific circles. The quantum resonance wasn't just unusual. It was revolutionary. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have predicted, was that this moment would become the catalyst for humanity's greatest technological leap. The accident was anything but random. The asteroid contained a quantum structure so complex, so fundamentally different from anything previously discovered, that it would rewrite the understanding of physical laws. Jack Chen's computational models began to generate patterns that looked less like scientific data and more like abstract art. Quantum signatures danced across screens, revealing a mathematical language that seemed to whisper of possibilities beyond current comprehension. Global comm blackout in 3, 2, 1, the facility AI announced. Suddenly, every communication channel went dark. Research stations across the solar system fell silent. For 17 minutes, humanity held its collective breath. When the channels reopened, nothing was the same. Dr. Arya Chen, still wearing the diplomatic uniform from the Galactic Conclave, received the first transmission. Her quantum-enhanced eye processed the data in milliseconds, a smile spreading across her face that promised something between scientific breakthrough and calculated revenge. The aliens who had laughed at humanity would soon learn that mockery was the most dangerous weapon one could use against a species built on turning limitations into opportunities. This was not just a scientific discovery. This was the first step in a revolution that would remake the galaxy. The global scientific convergence wasn't a conference. It was a war room disguised as a research symposium. Brilliant minds from every corner of the planet assembled in a massive underground facility beneath the Atacama Desert. Quantum physicists worked alongside materials engineers. Computational experts collaborated with xenobiologists. The traditional barriers between scientific disciplines shattered like outdated glass. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez stood at the center of a holographic projection that looked like a living, breathing mathematical nightmare. The quantum resonance data from the Martian asteroid pulsed with an energy that defied conventional understanding. Around him, 217 of humanity's most brilliant researchers worked with a singular, unprecedented focus. "We're not just studying this," Rodriguez announced to the assembled scientists. "We're weaponizing it." The word weaponizing hung in the air, not as a threat, but as a statement of survival. Every person in the room understood what was at stake. The Galactic Consortium's dismissal wasn't just an insult. It was a potential death sentence for humanity. Dr. Elena Sharma approached the central hologram, her fingers tracing complex quantum pathways that seemed to breathe and shift with each touch. "The resonance isn't just a discovery," she explained, her voice cutting through the technological hum of the facility. "It's a complete reimagining of quantum mechanics. What they had found was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a fundamental restructuring of how energy could be manipulated, transferred, and controlled. Governments had done something unprecedented. Every research budget, every scientific resource, every computational network was now unified under a single directive. From the quantum labs of Tokyo to the makeshift research centers in the Brazilian rainforest, humanity worked as a single, massive computational organism. The global communication network transformed. Quantum entanglement nodes replaced traditional data transmission. Computational speeds increased by factors that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Where other civilizations saw specialized knowledge, humans saw an opportunity for total integration. Jack Chen's computational models began to crack problems that had stumped alien civilizations for millennia. Materials that could phase between states of matter. Energy transmission mechanisms that ignored traditional physical limitations. Communication technologies that could penetrate quantum barriers. 17 days after the initial discovery, the first global test was scheduled. The world went silent. Massive quantum resonance arrays activated simultaneously across multiple continents. Communication networks flickered. Satellite systems went dark. For 17 minutes, humanity held its collective breath. When the systems came back online, everything had changed. Dr. Aria Chen appeared on global communication channels, her quantum-enhanced eye reflecting a smile that was equal parts scientific triumph and calculated revenge. Behind her, holographic displays showed data that looked more like living art than scientific readings. "We're ready," she said simply. The Galactic Consortium had laughed at humanity's primitive technologies. They had mocked human limitations. They had broken a simple datapad as a symbol of their perceived superiority. They had no idea what was coming. In those 17 minutes, humanity had transformed, not just technologically, but in spirit, in purpose, in potential. The quantum revolution had begun. The consortium's peacekeeping fleet approached the solar system like an executioner marching to a predetermined verdict. 57 massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, their quantum-locked hulls bristling with technologies that had subjugated hundreds of civilizations. Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the quantum interface of the HMS Defiance, humanity's first true quantum-adaptive combat vessel. Her hands didn't touch physical controls. They didn't exist anymore. Instead, her neural link transformed thought into tactical reality. "Incoming transmission," the ship's AI announced. "Consortium Standard Protocol Engagement Sequence." The holographic display filled with the crystalline form of Fleet Admiral Karar, representative of the consortium's most advanced military division. Its prismatic body shifted with contemptuous frequencies. "Humanity will cease unauthorized technological development. Surrender all research materials. Compliance is mandatory." Elena's smile never reached her eyes. "Acknowledge," she responded. What happened next would be studied by military strategists across the galaxy for centuries. The quantum adaptive technology developed during those 17 critical minutes transformed space itself. The human fleet didn't just defend. They became something entirely different. Quantum phase generators allowed ships to exist simultaneously in multiple spatial coordinates. Weapon systems that defied conventional physics transformed the very fabric of spacetime. The consortium dreadnoughts fired first. Massive energy weapons that had reduced entire civilizations to atomic dust lanced out toward the human fleet. But instead of impact, the weapons passed through, literally through, the human ships as if they were nothing more than sophisticated holograms. Karar's crystalline form flickered with what could only be described as confusion. Each human ship wasn't just avoiding attack. They were systematically dismantling the consortium vessels without firing a single conventional weapon. Quantum entanglement protocols allowed human ships to interface with alien systems, rendering billions in technological investment completely useless. Navigation systems failed. Weapon controls became nonsensical. Entire ships found themselves translated into spatial coordinates that couldn't exist. Primary objective: Elena subvocalized to the ship's AI. Demonstrate capability. Minimize casualties. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Within 17 minutes, a number that had become almost mystical to humanity, the entire consortium peacekeeping fleet was completely neutralized, not destroyed, not defeated in any traditional sense, simply rendered irrelevant. Communication channels across the galaxy lit up with impossible data streams. Every species watched as humanity transformed from a curiosity to something entirely unexpected. The final transmission from the HMS Defiance was simple and devastating. Consider this a warning. Fleet Admiral Karar's last recorded communication was a single, untranslatable sound, something between a mathematical equation and a primal scream of incomprehension. Aboard the Defiance, Elena Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. The datapad that had been crushed at the Galactic Conclave seemed like a lifetime ago. Humanity had just sent a message that would echo across the universe. They were no longer asking for a seat at the table. They were rewriting the entire concept of the table itself. Psychological warfare had always been humanity's most unexpected weapon. The consortium's communication networks began to unravel not through conventional hacking, but through a form of digital warfare that was equal parts art and quantum mathematics. Dr. Jack Chen sat in a specially designed neural interface chamber, his consciousness merging with a quantum computational matrix that was less a computer and more a living, breathing information ecosystem. Their first target, a captured consortium diplomatic vessel. "We're not destroying it," Jack explained to the assembled team. "We're going to transform it into a message." The vessel was reprogrammed with surgical precision. When it was released back to the consortium, it became a Trojan horse of unprecedented complexity. Every communication channel, every encrypted frequency became a conduit for something far more dangerous than traditional espionage. Personal communications of consortium leadership began to broadcast across galactic networks. Intimate secrets, hidden negotiations, private moments of weakness, all laid bare with mathematical precision. It wasn't just information exposure. It was a complete deconstruction of alien social structures. Admiral Karar's most private quantum-encrypted communications revealed complex personal conflicts. The silicon-based Kreenax diplomats found their intricate social hierarchies exposed through communications that revealed decades of manipulated information. Entire alien civilizations watched as their leadership's carefully constructed facades crumbled. The human team called it the Transparent Protocol. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the operation, her quantum-enhanced eye tracking the cascading information with clinical precision. This wasn't just an attack. It was a systematic dismantling of the consortium's psychological infrastructure. Alien species began to fragment. Where once there was a unified galactic hierarchy, now there were fractures, doubts, internal conflicts. The consortium's strength had always been its perceived unity. Humanity transformed that unity into its greatest weakness. Disinformation campaigns became quantum-level artworks. False communications were crafted with such mathematical precision that they were indistinguishable from truth. Entire diplomatic networks began to collapse under the weight of uncertainty. The Luminaries, a gaseous collective intelligence that had mocked humanity at the Galactic Conclave, found their collective consciousness fragmenting. Their quantum communication networks, once a point of supreme technological pride, became vectors of internal conflict. "We're not fighting a war," Dr. Arya Chen explained during a classified briefing. "We're conducting a systematic deconstruction of their entire conceptual understanding of conflict." Quantum entanglement allowed for communication manipulations that defied traditional understanding. A message could exist in multiple states simultaneously, true and false, revealing and concealing. The very nature of information became a weapon. The consortium's attempts to counteract these attacks only revealed more vulnerabilities. Every defensive mechanism became another avenue of attack. Their rigid technological thinking, which had served them for millennia, became their greatest weakness. 17 days into the operation, The galactic communication networks looked like a mathematically perfect nervous breakdown. Entire civilizations watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as humanity rewrote the rules of engagement. They weren't just fighting. They were teaching the universe a lesson about the true meaning of potential. The data had crushed at the Galactic Conclave seemed like a distant memory now. Humanity had transformed mockery into a weapon more devastating than any physical attack could ever be. The Helios Protocol was more than a weapon. It was humanity's ultimate statement. Dr. Aria Chen stood in the quantum resonance chamber, her body interfaced with a computational matrix that blurred the line between human consciousness and pure mathematical potential. The holographic displays around her looked like living art, fractals of possibility that danced with mathematical precision. Target acquired. The facility's quantum AI announced, Home system of Grand Diplomat Exelarin, the Archon who broke the datapad. Revenge, they would discover, was a science perfected. The quantum destabilization weapon wasn't about destruction. It was about fundamental transformation. Where conventional weapons would obliterate a star system, the Helios Protocol would unravel its very quantum structure. A surgical deconstruction of stellar mechanics that defied every known law of physics. Marcus Rodriguez's team had spent months developing a technology that could manipulate the fundamental quantum entanglement of stellar bodies. What began as a desperate mining expedition on a forgotten asteroid had evolved into humanity's most sophisticated weapon of cosmic recalibration. The first test would be surgical, precise, a message written in the language of quantum mechanics. As the weapon powered up, holographic feeds across multiple galaxies began to track the process. Scientists, diplomats, and military leaders from countless civilizations watched in a mixture of horror and incomprehensible fascination. Exelarin's home star began to change. It didn't explode. It didn't immediately die. Instead, it began to behave in ways that violated every known principle of stellar mechanics. Quantum fluctuations rippled through its core, creating patterns that looked less like destruction and more like a complex mathematical reconstruction. The star's hydrogen fusion processes began to destabilize, not through violent means, but through a precise quantum manipulation that was equal parts science and art. Energy patterns shifted. Magnetic fields twisted into impossible geometries. The very fabric of stellar existence began to unravel. Quantum cascade initiated, the AI reported, its voice devoid of emotion. Entire planetary systems within Exelarin's home cluster began to experience fundamental changes. Orbits shifted. Atomic structures realigned. It was less an attack and more a comprehensive restructuring of physical reality. Elena Rodriguez watched the holographic display, her quantum-enhanced eye tracking every microscopic change with clinical precision. This was more than revenge. This was a demonstration of potential. The consortium had laughed at humanity's limitations. Now they would understand the true meaning of technological capability. As the star's quantum structure continued to destabilize, communication channels across the galaxy lit up. Diplomatic networks buzzed with incomprehension. Military strategists struggled to understand what they were witnessing. Dr. Aria Chen allowed herself a small smile. The data had crushed at the Galactic Conclave seemed like a lifetime ago. This was humanity's true response, not just to that moment of humiliation, but to every moment of dismissal they had ever experienced. Helios Protocol, she subvocalized to the quantum AI, is now operational. The universe watched, and for the first time, the galaxy understood that humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of existence itself. Total war became an art form when humanity decided to dismantle the consortium. The quantum fleets moved like living mathematics, each ship an extension of a collective human consciousness that defied traditional understanding of warfare. Admiral Elena Rodriguez commanded from the HMS Defiance, her neural interface transforming strategic thinking into immediate tactical reality. They weren't just attacking. They were systematically deconstructing an entire galactic power structure. Each targeted star system was a precise surgical strike. Quantum resonance weapons didn't just destroy, they fundamentally restructured physical reality. Where conventional warfare would obliterate planets, humanity's approach was far more terrifying. Entire stellar infrastructures were reimagined, their fundamental quantum structures twisted into configurations that rendered them uninhabitable without a single conventional weapon being fired. The consortium's final counterattack was a desperate symphony of technological desperation. 50,000 ships emerged from quantum-locked deployment zones, their weapon systems representing millennia of technological development. They moved with a precision that had subjugated hundreds of civilizations. Advanced quantum shield technologies, faster-than-light communication networks, weapon systems that could reduce entire planetary systems to atomic dust. They faced ghosts. Human vessels phased between quantum states, existing simultaneously in multiple spatial coordinates. Weapon systems responded to thoughts faster than traditional computational matrices could process. The human fleet wasn't just adaptive. They were a living, breathing computational organism that rewrote the rules of engagement with every microsecond. Dr. Jack Chen's quantum computational matrices transformed the entire battlefield into a complex mathematical problem. Enemy weapon systems were not just intercepted, they were mathematically predicted, their potential trajectories calculated and neutralized before they could even be conceived. We're teaching them the true meaning of potential, Elena subvocalized to the ship's quantum eye. The luminaries, the gaseous collective intelligence that had once mocked humanity, found their quantum communication networks systematically dismantled. Their collective consciousness fragmented, each individual node exposed to a level of informational warfare they couldn't comprehend. The silicon-based Krenax watched their most advanced technological infrastructures become nothing more than complex mathematical puzzles to be solved and discarded. 17 days of continuous engagement transformed the very concept of galactic conflict. Consortium military leadership found their most secure communication channels converted into open networks. Strategic deployments became public spectacles. Every attempt to mount a defense became another vector of attack. This wasn't just warfare. This was a comprehensive deconstruction of an entire civilization's understanding of conflict, technology, and potential. Dr. Aria Chen monitored the engagement from a quantum resonance chamber, her consciousness interfacing with computational matrices that transformed strategic thinking into immediate tactical reality. The datapad crushed at the Galactic Conclave seemed like a distant memory now. As the final consortium defensive lines collapsed, it became clear that this was never about conquest. This was about teaching the universe a lesson. Humanity was no longer asking for recognition. They were demanding respect. The Galactic Reconstruction Conference was unlike any diplomatic gathering in recorded history. Dr. Aria Chen stood before representatives of the shattered consortium, her quantum-enhanced eye reflecting a calculus of potential that went beyond mere diplomacy. Behind her, a holographic representation of the galaxy pulsed with new mathematical possibilities, territories redrawn, civilizational boundaries reimagined. Humanity does not seek conquest, she began, her voice a precise instrument of communication. We seek evolution. The remaining consortium delegates, a fractured collection of species that had once ruled with technological supremacy, listened in a state of collective shock. Where once they had occupied positions of absolute power, now they were reduced to negotiators, their entire understanding of galactic hierarchy dismantled. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood beside her, a living testament to humanity's transformation. The military strategist who had systematically deconstructed entire civilizations now represented something far more complex than a conquering force. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the quantum physicist whose initial asteroid research had sparked this revolution, presented the framework of a new galactic order. It wasn't about domination. It was about potential. The quantum technologies developed during humanity's resistance became the foundation of a new collaborative framework. Species that had once been subjugated or marginalized found themselves with unprecedented opportunities. The rigid hierarchical structures of the consortium were replaced by a more fluid, adaptive system of galactic interaction. "We're not interested in ruling," Arya explained. "We're interested in pushing the boundaries of what's possible." The date had crushed at the initial galactic conclave seemed like a distant memory now. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had transformed into a comprehensive reimagining of galactic potential. The quantum resonance technologies that humanity had developed became a shared resource. Species that had once been technological vassals now found themselves with unprecedented access to revolutionary scientific understanding. The very concept of technological development was being rewritten. Jack Chen's computational matrices were transformed into open-source platforms. Navigation technologies that could phase between quantum states became available to emerging civilizations. The monopoly on advanced technology, which had defined galactic power structures for millennia, was systematically dismantled. Entire star systems that had been locked in technological stagnation began to show signs of unprecedented growth. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization for thousands of years began to dissolve. Elena Rodriguez looked out over the assembled delegates. This wasn't a victory celebration. This was the first chapter of something entirely new. "Potential," she said simply, "is not something granted. It's something discovered." The remaining consortium representatives, those who had survived the systematic deconstruction of their civilization, understood the profound nature of the moment. Humanity had not just defeated them. They had fundamentally transformed the very concept of galactic interaction. As the conference concluded, the holographic representation of the galaxy pulsed with new possibilities. Quantum pathways danced with mathematical precision, suggesting futures that no single civilization could have imagined. They had laughed at humanity. Now, their suns burned no more, but something far more important was rising.